I signed as guarantor for my sister-in-law. She disappeared and left me $120,000 in debt. It took me 4 years to pay it all off. When I finished, I sued her, froze everything, and now she works to pay me back. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. My full and real name is Deborah Regina Santos. I'm 42 years old with an existence intensely marked by obsessive financial responsibility, cultivated since adolescence when I saw my parents lose their own home due to poorly planned and reckless debts. A solid career, built brick by brick, as an administrative manager at a logistics company where I've worked for 18 consecutive years without a single unjustified absence or delay in payments of my personal financial obligations, and a devastating, imperceptible, self-destructive naivety that made me blindly believe that family ties automatically meant justified trust and mutual protection against the inevitable adversities of complicated adult life. The absolutely terrifying, financially devastating, and ultimately revealing story about predatory human nature that I'm going to narrate now, with each painful number permanently engraved in my traumatized memory, began on a seemingly normal, ordinary Thursday afternoon in April when Patricia, my sister-in-law married to my older brother Ricardo for 10 years, unexpectedly appeared at my modest but organized apartment, bringing homemade cake still warm, carefully wrapped in aluminum foil, and that charming smile perfectly calibrated that she always used when she needed something significant, but pretended it was an insignificant casual request between close and trustworthy family members. I had just arrived exhausted from another particularly stressful, crushing day at the office, coordinating a team of 12 employees through a rigorous quarterly financial audit that exposed worrying inconsistencies requiring urgent corrections before the weekly presentation to an impatient and critical board. My feet aching inside mandatory medium-heeled shoes to maintain the expected professional corporate appearance. Dress shirt uncomfortably stuck to sweaty back from central air conditioning broken for 3 weeks that management promised to fix without ever meeting the established deadline. Patricia entered cheerfully, excessively animated, hugging me effusively, as if we hadn't seen each other in months, when in fact we had lunch together the previous Sunday at a family barbecue celebrating my father's birthday, commenting enthusiastically about the modest decoration of my 2-bedroom apartment that I had bought alone, proudly after saving the down payment for 6 full years working overtime shifts whenever possible. Dear favorite sister-in-law, I need to talk quickly about an incredible, fantastic opportunity that appeared for me and Ricardo to finally realize our dream of having our own apartment instead of wasting money, paying rent eternally to owners who get rich at our expense monthly. She began placing the cake on my scratched coffee table while I prepared instant coffee in the compact kitchen. Melodious voice loaded with perfectly fake enthusiasm that I naively, stupidly interpreted as genuine joy. We found a perfect, wonderful apartment in a great, well-located neighborhood close to the subway and excellent schools in case we decide to have children in the future. Absolutely unbelievable price because the owners are desperate to sell quickly to pay off urgent debts before inevitable judicial execution. Financing approved by the bank, all documentation verified impeccably, only missing a tiny, insignificant bureaucratic formality that you can easily resolve with your impeccable credit reputation and proven professional stability. I should have noticed obvious signs, screaming alarms at that crucial moment when she purposely, strategically, manipulatively minimized the devastating request about to completely change the trajectory of my financial existence for the next torturous years. But I was too tired mentally and physically after a particularly brutal week at work. I naively, automatically, stupidly trusted family because I grew up fervently believing that shared blood created unbreakable moral obligations of mutual loyalty and reciprocal protection. What kind of formality exactly, Patricia? I asked, distractedly serving steaming coffee in mismatched cups, while my mind was still processing complex financial reports left incomplete at the office awaiting review first thing the next morning. To sign as guarantor for the financing because the bank requires additional guarantee considering that Ricardo is temporarily between jobs currently, an absolutely transitory situation that will be resolved in the next few weeks when pending interviews at 3 different companies finalize already well-advanced selection processes. She explained casually, carelessly, as if asking to borrow a cup of sugar instead of a potentially catastrophic financial responsibility. It's literally just a banking bureaucratic formality to satisfy ridiculous, excessive regulations of the paranoid Brazilian financial system. It won't even really appear in your name, just in the invisible contractual backstage that no one ever looks at again after initial signature. And obviously we would never need to activate the guarantee because we'll pay rigorously, punctually, each installment monthly without a single delay, considering that my personal training career is taking off wonderfully, with new clients arriving weekly through enthusiastic referrals and the digital platform I'm systematically building. Her words flowed smoothly, convincingly, like poisoned honey that I voluntarily, eagerly ingested without questioning the toxic ingredients carefully hidden under a superficial layer of comforting family sweetness. Patricia, I don't really know if it's a good idea to get involved financially, even if it's just a formality, as you say, because I learned painfully through my parents' traumatic experience that real estate debts are serious, prolonged, potentially destructive commitments if something goes wrong unexpectedly. I began hesitantly. Financial self-preservation instinct, cultivated obsessively for decades, triggering weak, easily ignorable alarms. Maybe you should wait until Ricardo gets a stable new job before taking on such a significant, substantial financial commitment of dozens of years. Patricia's expression instantly, dramatically transformed from rehearsed joy to convincing deep sadness. Green eyes filling with tears that sprouted suspiciously fast, perfectly calibrated to emotionally manipulate. Deborah, I honestly can't believe that you, precisely you, who always preach the importance of united families supporting each other through temporary difficulties, would refuse to help your own brother realizing the legitimate dream of having a stable home to finally build a secure family. We're talking about a unique, unrepeatable opportunity that will disappear completely if we don't act immediately because other interested buyers are making aggressive, competitive proposals. If you really don't trust us to pay the commitment responsibly, then I suppose years of family coexistence mean absolutely nothing compared to your neurotic, pathological obsession with selfish financial security, she said with perfectly calibrated, trembling voice mixing manipulative guilt with strategic victimization. Her words hit precisely, painfully, the psychological vulnerable points that she knew intimately after years observing family dynamics and methodically identifying exploitable weaknesses. My brother Ricardo had always been a fragile person financially, emotionally, professionally, since turbulent adolescence, marked by questionable, impulsive choices, numerous unstable jobs lasting months before inevitable dismissals due to interpersonal conflicts or inadequate performance, consecutive disastrous romantic relationships until meeting Patricia, who initially seemed to beneficially stabilize him. I always felt excessive, possibly pathological protective responsibility as a younger sister compensating for the absence of a strong father figure after our parents' traumatic divorce when he was 16 and I was 13. It's not a question of family trust, Patricia. It's just basic, sensible financial prudence that any responsible person should exercise before assuming a significant legal commitment of tens, possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars. I tried to explain reasonably, defensively, while manipulative guilt began to corrode initial sensible determination. But let me think carefully. Talk to my bank manager tomorrow to fully understand the specific legal and financial implications before making a definitive decision about such an important, consequential matter. Tomorrow will be too late. Deborah, the owners established a final deadline today at 9 p.m. to deliver complete documentation, including proof of qualified guarantor, or they'll immediately sell to other buyers, anxiously waiting in line who will pay even more than the value advantageously negotiated with Ricardo. She insisted urgently, dramatically, pressing, temporarily eliminating the opportunity for careful, deliberate reflection that could unmask underlying manipulation. Please, Day, I'm begging you, as a sister-in-law, as family, as a person who loves you sincerely and always admired your inspiring responsibility, it's literally signing 3 simple papers that I have here already conveniently prepared by the bank. Takes 5 minutes maximum of your precious time, and will be eternally, deeply grateful for the solidary help that will never, ever really be needed, because we're responsible adults committed to paying obligations punctually. That fateful, irreversible moment when I gave in to manipulative pressure instead of listening to self-preservation, instinct screaming urgent warnings will remain eternally as the most stupid, destructive, self-destructive decision of my entire adult existence. I signed the documents quickly, mechanically, stupidly, while Patricia watched anxiously, ensuring I placed a clear, legible signature in each location indicated by strategically positioned yellow marker stickers, explaining quickly with smooth, hypnotic voice that they were identical, standardized banking contracts used thousands of times daily in financial institutions nationally. Done, Patricia. I sincerely hope everything goes perfectly well with your new apartment and Ricardo finally gets a stable job, allowing you to build a solid, responsible financial life. I said, handing over the signed documents with a persistent, uncomfortable feeling in my stomach that I deliberately, stupidly ignored, attributing it to accumulated fatigue and neglected hunger. You are literally the best sister-in-law in the entire universe. Deborah, I solemnly promise we'll never forget this incredible family generosity and will reward appropriately as soon as we stabilize financially completely. Patricia declared, hugging me effusively. Excessively before leaving, hurriedly carrying the signed documents like a trophy, conquered cunningly, strategically, predatorily. I should have found it strange that she didn't offer copies of the signed contracts from my personal files. Didn't provide specific details about the exact address of the finance department, precise value of monthly installments, total financing term, or any verifiable concrete information beyond vague, comforting promises destined to temporarily calm an uneasy conscience. The following 3 months passed, normally, apparently, without worrying incidents. Patricia regularly posted cheerful photographs on social media showing renovation work on the supposedly new apartment, progressively decorated with furniture bought in installments. Ricardo finally got a job selling insurance through an acquaintance who offered a dubious opportunity based on variable commissions without guaranteed base salary. Monthly family dinners continued normally with trivial conversations about daily life without any mention of the financing or my participation as conveniently, purposely forgotten gear. I had practically completely forgotten the episode when an official registered letter arrived at my residential address on a rainy, melancholic Tuesday in July, bringing absolutely devastating, terrifying news that would completely transform the next 4 years of my existence into an endless financial hell. The formal, cold, legally impersonal bank letter bureaucratically informed that the real estate financing where I appeared as solidary guarantor was in default for 2 complete consecutive months. Unpaid installments were accumulating exorbitant daily compound interest, progressive contractual penalties growing exponentially, and as legal solidary guarantor I was immediately, fully, unquestionably responsible for the total accumulated debt that already reached a frightening $32,400 considering overdue principal plus contractually calculated late charges. My heart literally stopped momentarily before racing violently like a war drum painfully hammering against compressed ribs when I reread again those technically destructive paragraphs explaining that I had an unextendable deadline of 15 calendar days to fully regularize the debt or would face immediate judicial execution, including monthly salary, bank account blocking, permanent national credit restriction through credit protection agencies. I immediately, frantically, desperately called Patricia, but her cell phone went straight to voicemail, indicating it was turned off or out of coverage area purposely, strategically, cowardly. I tried Ricardo repeatedly for 2 straight hours with the same frustrating, disheartening results. I drove in a state of growing panic to the address. I vaguely remembered them mentioning living at recently, but the apartment was completely empty. The elderly landlord informed that they had moved abruptly 3 weeks ago without notifying in advance, leaving 2 months of overdue rent that he was trying to collect judicially without success. I went personally to the bank branch first thing next morning, demanding urgent explanations, complete details about the incomprehensible, terrifying situation that apparently held me financially responsible for a growing real estate debt I didn't consciously authorize, assuming Dr. Carlos, 51-year-old relationship bank manager with a professionally neutral but not completely devoid of human compassional expression, opened a voluminous digital file on the computer progressively, painfully revealing the full extent of the financial trap that Patricia had predatorily built using my naive trust as a destructive tool. Mrs. Debra, I perfectly understand your understandable shock at the situation, but unfortunately, legally, unquestionably, the documents you signed constitute full, irrevocable, solidary guarantee of real estate financing in the total amount of $127,000, distributed in 360 monthly installments over 30 years according to standard contracts, validly signed, notarized, he explained gently, but firmly pointing to the computer screen displaying my unmistakable, recognizable signature authenticating, devastating financial responsibility. This is absolutely impossible. Incorrect. Patricia told me explicitly, categorically, that it was just an insignificant bureaucratic formality, that my name wouldn't even really appear, that the guarantee would never be activated because they would pay punctually. I protested with increasingly hysterical, desperate voice while overwhelming reality began penetrating stunned, resistant consciousness. I didn't read the specific contract details because I stupidly, naively trusted her word as a sister-in-law. a supposedly loyal family. Surely, there's some legal clause protecting against fraud, bad faith, deliberate manipulation. Dr. Carlos sighed heavily, like a man who had witnessed infinite variations of the same tragic human drama repeating itself tirelessly through decades of banking career. Mrs. Debra, legally, juridically, contractually, it doesn't matter what was verbally promised or what were the persuasive circumstances that led to the signature. What matters exclusively, unquestionably, is that you freely, consciously signed legal documents constituting full solidary guarantee. Solidary guarantee means precisely that you respond fully, immediately, independently for the debt exactly under the same conditions as the principal debtor should they become in default, which is exactly the current unfortunate situation, he explained patiently, pedagogically, like a professor teaching a painful lesson about adult financial responsibility. The principal borrowers, your brother Ricardo and sister-in-law Patricia, not only stopped paying installments 2 months ago, but apparently disappeared completely. Don't respond to official banking communications sent repeatedly. Provided addresses are outdated and incorrect, phones permanently deactivated. The bank has no legal option except to activate solidary, which in this case is exclusively you as the only guarantor contractually listed. His words reverberated through the artificially air-conditioned office like a definitive judicial sentence sealing inevitable. Devastating financial fate for the subsequent torturous endless years of extreme sacrifice. Constant deprivation, permanent shame. How much exactly do I currently owe, and how much will I be responsible for? Totally if they never pay anything again. I asked with trembling voice, weakly, controlling tears threatening to overflow publicly, embarrassingly. Currently, the overdue accumulated debt with late interest and contractual penalties is $32,400. That needs to be urgently regularized in the next 12 days to avoid immediate judicial execution and devastating credit restrictions remaining registered. 4 years after full payment. If the principal borrowers never responsibly resume payments, you will be legally, unquestionably responsible for the total residual balance of the financing that currently remains at $127,000 distributed in the remaining 358 monthly installments of approximately $354 each plus monthly compound interest of 0.8% according to the specific contractual table. Dr. Carlos detailed methodically, coldly, devastatingly, each number hammering deeper the horrifying realization of the catastrophic magnitude of the involuntarily, stupidly assumed financial problem. I left the bank branch, staggering dizzy, stunned like a brutally knocked out boxer trying to maintain minimally functional consciousness. Midday sun cruelly burning exposed skin while hurried passers-by passed, indifferent to the silent personal disaster happening internally, devastatingly. How was this possible? How could people I called family, shared Sunday meals with, gave gifts to on birthdays deliberately, premeditatedly, cruelly set such a devastating financial trap, disappear cowardly, leaving me alone facing the catastrophic consequences of their fraudulent decisions? I immediately, frantically called Marina, my best friend and confidant for 15 years since we started working in the same commercial building, sharing hurried lunches at the noisy food court, and sincere venting about impossible bosses, complicated relationships, postponed dreams. Mari, I need you to come urgently to my apartment right now. I can't process what's happening. I think I'm going crazy. Completely losing my mind, I managed to articulate between uncontrollable sobs that made my entire body shake violently. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. Just said with that characteristic comforting firmness, I'm leaving the office now. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Breathe deeply. Day. Marina arrived quickly, hugged me long without saying anything initially, just letting me collapse completely on the worn sofa while tears soaked her expensive silk blouse that she never cared about ruining for my sake. When I finally managed to articulate coherent words between convulsive sobs, I narrated the entire humiliating story from Patricia Vism with poison manipulation cake to the devastating bank letter, transforming my existence into an inescapable financial nightmare. Marina listened attentively to each torturous word, expression progressively passing from initial shock to growing anger, finally solidifying into iron determination. I knew well from previous situations when someone tried to harm people she loved unconditionally. Deborah, listen carefully to every word I'm going to say now, because it's absolutely crucial, vital for your financial and emotional survival for the next years. Marina began, firmly holding my trembling shoulders, forcing me to look directly into her brown eyes burning with righteous indignation. You are not stupid, naive, or guilty for trusting family, as you should naturally be able to do without suspecting premeditated betrayal. Patricia and Ricardo are professional manipulative scammers who studied your psychological weaknesses for whole years, waiting for the opportune moment to set a devastating trap. This reflects absolutely nothing about your character, intelligence, or value as a human being. It reflects exclusively on their predatory nature. Her words slowly penetrated through the dense fog of paralyzing self-flagellation that had dominated my tortured mind since discovering the full extent of the financial catastrophe. But Mari, how didn't I notice obvious signs? How did I let this happen, stupidly signing documents without reading, blindly trusting vague promises? I protested weakly, voice choked by overwhelming shame, threatening to suffocate me completely. Any minimally sensible person would have questioned, investigated, protected themselves adequately. I was a complete idiot, believing that family meant automatic loyalty, reciprocal protection against adversities. I deserve the consequences of this pathetic naivety. This stupid trust. Marina shook me gently but firmly by the shoulders, interrupting the descending spiral of destructive self. Stop immediately with that toxic self-flagellating narrative, Deborah. Manipulators like Patricia are masters at exploiting precisely admirable qualities like family loyalty, generosity, trust. They strategically transform virtues into vulnerabilities. Thousands of intelligent, educated, cautious people fall into similar traps daily because professional scammers obsessively study human psychology. Perfect persuasive techniques during years practicing on successive victims. You were a deliberate target, not a negligent voluntary participant. The difference is absolutely crucial to properly process trauma without internalizing guilt that belongs exclusively to the perpetrators. I breathed deeply, trying to absorb the wisdom of her words, fighting the ingrained impulse to assume total responsibility for a situation created entirely by others' malicious decisions. What do I do now, practically, Mari? How do I survive financially the next year's paying an immense debt I didn't consciously contract? How do I face the shame, humiliation of colleagues discovering the situation? How do I rebuild a life completely destroyed when I can barely get out of bed in the mornings? I asked desperately needing a concrete plan. Practical steps to navigate the seemingly insurmountable disaster. First thing, we'll go together to consult a specialized contract law attorney I know from college, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a brilliant woman with decades of experience defending victims of fraudulent guarantees. Marina responded, already mentally formulating strategy with that characteristic organizational efficiency that made her an exceptional accountant. Second, you're going to stay temporarily at my apartment until we stabilize the financial situation because I won't allow you to face this alone in isolation. Third, we'll completely map your finances. Create a rigorous budget, negotiate with the bank sustainable payment conditions, avoiding immediate judicial execution. Fourth, eventually, when you're emotionally stronger, we'll consider hiring a private investigator tracking Ricardo and Patricia for adequate legal accountability. The clarity, specificity of the plan marginally calmed the paralyzed and panic that threatened to completely consume me since receiving the devastating letter hours ago. Marina always possessed an extraordinary capacity to transform overwhelming emotional chaos into manageable concrete steps, a skill that had repeatedly saved me through previous minor crises, but would be absolutely vital, navigating the current unprecedented catastrophe. Thank you, Mari. I don't know how I'd survive this without you, I murmured gratefully, hugging her tightly while tears began flowing again, but this time mixed with tiny relief of not being completely alone facing the devastation. I'll always be here unconditionally. Duh, that's the true meaning of chosen family versus blood family that cruelly betrayed you, she responded maternally, stroking my disheveled hair. We spent the rest of that interminable night organizing practically. Marina called Dr. Helena, getting an emergency consultation the next morning, helped me pack essential belongings for temporary move to her apartment, prepared strong calming tea while I tried to mentally process the magnitude of the forced change in the next weeks, months, possibly years of extreme financial deprivation, paying a gigantic debt that wasn't legitimately mine but for which I responded legally, unquestionably. That night I slept intermittently, waking repeatedly from vivid nightmares where I signed infinite documents while Patricia laughed maniacally, where banks judicially executed everything I owned, leaving me literally on the street with absolutely nothing, where I confronted Ricardo demanding explanations, but he evaporated like smoke, mocking my pathetic naivety. Marina slept on the nearby sofa, waking immediately each time I screamed in my sleep, offering silent, comforting presence until I fell asleep again, fitfully, restlessly. At 6 the next morning, we gave up pretending we could rest adequately, prepared strong coffee silently, while the rising sun gradually illuminated the modest apartment, revealing mundane normalcy, cruelly contrasting with devastating interior emotional turbulence. The consultation with Dr. Helena at 9 o'clock was simultaneously enlightening and terrifying, progressively revealing brutal legal reality of the situation while I chronologically narrated events from Patricia's visit to the bank letter. Dr. Helena was an impressive 53-year-old woman, professionally cut short, silver gray hair, penetrating dark brown eyes, protected by reading glasses hanging on a gold chain, commanding presence that inspired immediate confidence despite natural severity. Her office was impeccably organized. Walls covered with numerous diplomas and specialized certifications, shelves filled with voluminous legal codes and carefully cataloged jurisprudential precedents. Mrs. Deborah, I perfectly understand the devastating emotional trauma you're experiencing, but I need to be absolutely frank, honest about the legal reality you face so we can develop a realistic, defensive strategy instead of feeding false hopes that would painfully collapse later. Dr. Helena began after attentively listening to the complete account, fingers professionally interlaced on the organized desk. Solidary guarantee is a legal institute firmly established in the Brazilian Civil Code, meaning that the guarantor responds fully, immediately, unquestionably for the debt exactly under the same conditions as the principal debtor. There's no legal distinction between the responsibility of the original borrower and the solidary guarantor. The bank can collect from either one, both simultaneously or sequentially according to institutional convenience. Her words fell like a definitive judicial hammer sealing financial fate for subsequent years. But surely, there's legal recourse, protection against manipulation, bad faith, false promises that induced contract signature. I argued desperately, seeking legal escape from the trap closing in. Patricia deliberately lied about the nature of the documents, purposely minimized the responsibility involved, pressed temporally, eliminating the opportunity for adequate reflection. Doesn't this constitute fraud, coercion, consent, defect, nullifying the contract? Dr. Helena sighed heavily, professional expression marginally softening, revealing underlying human compassion. Theoretically, yes, consent defect can nullify contracts in specific circumstances. Practically, however, judicially proving there was coercion, fraud, or substantial error is extremely difficult, time-consuming, expansive when involving voluntarily signed documents notarized without eyewitnesses to the manipulation. It would be your word against hers. And courts generally privilege legal security of written contracts over subsequent allegations of bad faith that could be strategically fabricated by defaulting debtors trying to escape legitimate obligations. Judicial process contesting the guarantee's validity would take years, cost tens of thousands of dollars in attorney fees, expert testimonies, procedural costs, with low statistical probability of final success. The brutal explanation destroyed fragile hopes of a magical legal solution that would nullify financial responsibility through clever legal argument. The inexorable reality was simple, cruel. I had signed legally valid documents, responded fully for the debt regardless of circumstances that led to signature, needed to face consequences during subsequent years, paying methodically or facing devastating judicial execution. So I'm literally trapped, financially condemned for the next years without possible escape. I asked, with a defeated voice, last resistance crumbling before implacable legal reality. Not exactly condemned, but definitely financially responsible according to current law, Dr. Helena gently but firmly corrected. There are defensive strategies, possible negotiations that can minimize damage, make the situation manageable instead of completely catastrophic. First, we'll immediately go to the bank to negotiate debt restructuring, term extension, interest reduction, any possible concession considering you're an involuntary defaulting guarantor instead of a deliberately deadbeat principal debtor. Banks prefer to negotiate sustainable long payments versus judicially executing with high procedural costs, uncertain recovery, negative publicity. Second, we'll investigate the possibility of locating Ricardo and Patricia for solidary accountability through regressive action where you paying the debt can later judicially collect from them the disbursed amounts plus moral damages. But they disappeared completely, purposely, strategically knowing they would eventually be sought. I protested. How do you locate people who don't want to be found? Probably change cities, maybe even states, living discreetly avoiding any traceable trail. Marina intervened for the first time during the consultation. I know a private investigator specialized in tracking fugitive debtors. Sergio Tavares, former bank employee who specialized in locating people trying to escape debts. He works discreetly, efficiently, has a reasonable success rate according to acquaintances who've previously used his services. Dr. Helena nodded approvingly. A competent private investigator can be a valid strategic investment if he manages to locate the principal debtors, enabling subsequent judicial recovery. However, I need to realistically warn, even locating them, judicially executing them. Financial recovery depends completely on them possessing attachable assets, executable income. If they're living informally, without assets registered in their own names, formal salaries, recovery may be practically impossible despite theoretical judicial victory. It would be a moral victory, psychological satisfaction of legally holding them accountable, but not necessarily substantial financial recovery. Her words were brutally honest, devoid of consoling false optimism, but ultimately respectful of my intelligence by presenting complete reality without infantilizing protective filters. I appreciated direct honesty despite painful because I needed to ground subsequent decisions in concrete reality instead of comforting fantasies that would later collapse. I fully understand the limitations, risks, unfavorable probabilities, I responded slowly, mentally processing all information received during consultation. But I need to try something active, constructive, instead of just passively accepting the role of helpless victim, condemned to eternally pay debt I didn't legitimately contract. Even if financial recovery is unlikely, their legal accountability has intrinsic value, offers a sense of partial restorative justice instead of complete resignation to perpetrated injustice. Dr. Helena smiled slightly approvingly. For the first time during the serious consultation, that combative mentality, refusal to passively accept victimization, is exactly the attitude that differentiates clients who eventually overcome adversities from those who remain perpetually emotionally broken even after financial resolution. Let's develop a dual strategy. Defensive front, negotiating with the bank's sustainable payment conditions, while simultaneously offensive front, investigating, locating, prosecuting principal debtors. It will require enormous patience, substantial psychological resistance, modest but strategically allocated financial resources. But it's the most balanced approach, maximizing probability of partial recovery instead of total resignation. We left Dr. Helena's office 3 hours later with a concrete multi-stage plan. First, meeting with Dr. Carlos at the bank the following afternoon to negotiate debt restructuring, presenting the situation honestly, requesting humanized conditions, considering exceptional circumstances. Second, hiring investigator Sergio to begin immediate tracking of Ricardo and Patricia, using available basic information like last known address, old phone numbers, possibly deactivated but archived social media profiles. Third, preparation of regressive judicial action to be filed immediately after successful location of principal debtors. The meeting with Dr. Carlos at the bank was a humiliating experience, exposing financial vulnerability completely before a professional stranger who, although polite, courteous, maintained appropriate institutional distance, constantly reminding that he represented banking interests primarily, not my personal well-being. I honestly narrated circumstances that led to document's signature, Patricia's deliberate manipulation, subsequent cowardly disappearance, my genuine willingness to honor legal responsibility despite moral injustice, need for sustainable payment conditions, avoiding additional default, mutually harmful judicial execution. Dr. Carlos patiently listened to the complete presentation, consulted internal systems verifying my impeccable credit history before the guarantee, complete absence of previous payment delays, professional stability of 18 years at the same company, finally sighed, concluding analysis. Mrs. Deborah, I can perceive genuine sincerity in your statements. Extraordinary circumstances that led to the current situation. The bank always prefers recovery through collaborative negotiation versus expensive, time-consuming judicial litigation with uncertain outcome. I'll internally propose debt restructuring with significant term extension, substantial reduction of late interest, monthly installments adjusted within your real payment capacity based on declared salary. I can't promise guaranteed approval, but I'll strongly recommend humanization of conditions considering excellent previous credit history, mitigating circumstances of the guarantee, demonstrated commitment to responsibly resolve the situation. The proposal, when finally approved days later, brought marginal relief. Total debt of $127,000 would be rescheduled into 48 monthly installments of $2,604 instead of the original financing's 360 installments. concentrating financial sacrifice into 4 intense years instead of 3 decades of moderate deprivation. Interest was dramatically reduced from 0.8% monthly to 0.3%, reflecting banking recognition of special circumstances. The monthly amount represented approximately 45% of my net salary, leaving 55% for all other vital expenses: housing, food, transportation, health, clothing, emergencies. It would be brutal financial squeeze, complete elimination of any luxury, leisure, savings, but theoretically sustainable if I maintained iron budget discipline, robust, hail-stable employment. Marina absolutely insisted I live temporarily at her apartment for at least the first 6 months, paying only half of shared expenses until establishing sustainable payment rhythm, accumulating minimum emergency reserve, preventing total financial collapse, facing medical or professional unforeseen event. Her unquestionable generosity, unwavering loyalty during devastating crisis completely redefined my understanding about true meaning of family. Not automatically guaranteed loyalty from shared blood, but conscious choice to mutually support each other through adversities. Sacrifice personal comfort benefiting unjustly suffering loved one. Ricardo remained technically my brother biologically, but had irreparably broken any moral, emotional bond through calculated betrayal. Marina, although legally a stranger, was true sister in every sense that truly mattered fundamentally. Investigator Sergio began tracking work immediately after hiring, charging modest fees of $2,000 monthly during 3-month limited initial investigative phase with contingent bonus clause of 20% of any judicially recovered amount, incentivizing success instead of artificial prolongation. He was a 49-year-old man, purposely cultivated discreet appearance for unnoticed surveillance. Sharp, light blue eyes noticing microscopic details others would ignore. Decades of banking experience providing intimate knowledge about how people try to hide assets, disappear from creditors, rebuild lives under partially falsified identities. The first 3 investigation months produced repeated frustrations. Ricardo and Patricia had completely disconnected from social media. Old phones remained perpetually turned off. Last known address had been empty for months, according to discreetly interrogated neighbors. Previous employers reported not having updated contact information. Ricardo's distant relatives that Sergio managed to locate claimed ignorance about current whereabouts or refused to cooperate, deliberately protecting them. Each weekly report from Sergio brought progressively diminishing hopes, growing doubts about search viability. Temptation to give up saving scarce resources to pay debt faster instead of investing in apparently futile pursuit of purposely evaporated human ghosts. But Marina, unconditionally faithful as always, firmly insisted we not give up prematurely when we were so close to completing the contracted initial period. Dio, you invested emotionally, financially in this search for justice. Giving up now would be handing complete victory to them, allowing them to flee unpunished from consequences while you continue paying a loan for the next years. Let's complete the contracted 3 months. Reevaluate afterward. With Sergio based on real progress instead of frustrated expectations, she reasonably argued during modest dinner at the shared apartment. Simple pasta with economical homemade sauce that had become our regular meal during forced economy. On the 3rd week of the 3rd investigation month, when I had practically lost hopes of successful location, Sergio called on a rainy Thursday at 10 p.m. with unusual excitement in his usually professionally controlled voice. Deborah, I finally got a solid lead through a banking contact who monitors new account openings in the entire national system. Patricia registered a checking account at a digital bank using true full name, legitimate social security number in a medium-sized city approximately 250 miles away 2 weeks ago. Apparently they relaxed initial paranoid vigilance, erroneously believing that elapsed time made them safe, or simply needed a formal account to receive payments from some recent professional activity. My heart accelerated vertiginously, for the first time in months, feeling something beyond resigned exhaustion. Are you absolutely sure it's really her, Sergio? Can't it be a coincidental homonym or system error? I asked, controlling breathing, avoiding premature hopes that could painfully collapse. I cross-checked multiple data confirming identity, social security number, birth date, mother's full name listed in documents. Everything corresponds perfectly. Additionally, tracking the address provided in the account opening, I managed to confirm that Ricardo also resides at the same address. They're living together, apparently normally rebuilding life without major concerns about legal consequences of past actions. Sergio explained with audible professional satisfaction of a hunter finally cornering elusive prey after frustrating prolonged pursuit. The news should have brought triumphant joy, but I felt mainly cold, calculated anger, thinking about how they lived tranquilly. Unconcernedly, while I worked occasional double shifts, gave up any leisure, economy, minimum luxury to pay debt they deliberately, cowardly created. What do we do now strategically? Sergio, how do we proceed to ensure they don't flee again when they discover they've been located? I questioned urgently. Renewed determination, replacing accumulated discouragement from preceding months. I'll go to the city personally tomorrow to establish discreet surveillance, confirming routines, current jobs, possibly locally registered assets, vehicles, real estate, additional bank accounts. Simultaneously, Dr. Helena should immediately prepare judicial petition requesting preventive account blocking, salary garnishment if there are formal employment links, vehicle arrest eventually registered. We need to act coordinately, quickly, before they have opportunity to disappear again. The following 5 days passed in militarily coordinated frenetic activity. Sergio traveled immediately, establishing professional surveillance, photographically documenting Patricia and Ricardo's daily routines. Discovering she worked formally as receptionist at a local gym while he sold dental plans door-to-door with apparently modest results, they lived in a small but comfortable rented apartment, owned a used vehicle registered in Patricia's name, maintained apparently normal, tranquil life completely unconcerned about cowardly abandoned financial responsibilities. Dr. Helena meticulously prepared extensive, detailed judicial petition chronologically narrating the entire story from fraudulent guarantee to deliberate disappearance, presenting voluminous evidence including original contracts, bank statements, notarized testimonies, Sergio's investigative reports proving current location and partial financial capacity. The judge, analyzing the case, demonstrated rare appreciated human sensitivity, granting injunction, immediately blocking both their bank accounts, determining garnishment of 30% of formal salaries, preventive arrest of registered vehicle, preventing sale or transfer until final merit judgment. The judicial decision represented significant partial victory. Legal validation that the suffered injustice was institutionally recognized, initial accountability of perpetrators beginning concretely, but the greater, deeper satisfaction would come when I finally personally confronted Patricia and Ricardo, looked directly into their eyes, seeing recognition, panic, devastating understanding that cowardly actions had finally, inevitably reached to deserve fair consequences. Dr. Helena initially advised against direct personal confrontation, alleging unnecessary emotional risks, possibility of legal complications if interaction became heated, physically hostile, but I inflexibly insisted I needed this psychological closure, personal validation that I wasn't a permanently broken, helpless victim but resilient survivor who fought strategically, persistently for deserved justice. I need them to personally see the woman they considered too stupid, too broken to represent real threat. They need to know that each sacrifice I made during 4 years, each installment paid painfully, each abandoned luxury strengthened me. Instead of destroying me as they cowardly planned, I argued with unshakable determination that finally reluctantly convinced Dr. Helena. We traveled together on an ironically beautiful sunny Saturday morning. Me, Marina, and Dr. Helena driving 250 miles through tranquil highways while growing nervousness mixed with iron determination in my tight stomach. Sergio had coordinated strategic timing. Patricia worked Saturdays at the gym. Ricardo usually stayed home sleeping late after Friday's drinking with new acquaintances according to established surveillance. We arrived at the small provincial town at noon, quickly lunched at a modest nearby diner while Sergio confirmed. Patricia was working normally. Ricardo remained at the apartment alone. Probably, we strategically decided to approach Ricardo first, potentially less emotionally volatile confrontation, considering he had always been passive coward, dominated by Patricia instead of principal active manipulator. We climbed stairs of the modest 3-story residential building, hearts beating accelerated, Sergio remaining discreetly nearby, but not invasively. I rang the doorbell with slightly trembling hand, not from fear but from anticipatory adrenaline. Ricardo opened the door, sleepy, confused, expression instantly transforming into absolute panic, immediately recognizing me despite for elapsed years. Reflexively trying to close the door, but Sergio had already positioned his foot firmly blocking Debra I didn't expect. "Can we talk? It's not what it seems." ... Ricardo stuttered pathetically, face suddenly pale, hands visibly shaking while retreating into the small, modestly furnished apartment interior. I entered calmly, deliberately, Marina and Dr. Helena protectively flanking me while Sergio remained at the door blocking potential escape. "It's not what it seems," Ricardo. So how exactly does the situation seem where you and Patricia deliberately, premeditatedly set a devastating financial trap against your own sister, cowardly disappeared, leaving me alone paying $127,000 in debt you fraudulently contracted, lived tranquilly, for complete years without a single attempt at contact, explanation, apology, or assumption of responsibility? I questioned with controlled, cold voice, each word precisely articulated like a surgical scalpel, cutting through pathetic excuses he would inevitably try to offer. It was all Patricia's idea. I just followed, didn't know it would be so serious. Thought we'd manage to pay eventually. Things got financially difficult. We had to move ... double quotes, he babbled defensively, trying to completely transfer guilt as he'd always done his entire life, avoiding responsibility for his own disastrous choices. Shared responsibility? Ricardo, you jointly signed contracts, benefited from the financed money, actively participated in the strategic disappearance, lived comfortably for years while your sister sacrificed herself paying your debts. Complicity is no less culpable than original planning. Marina intervened with contained anger, protective loyalty verbally manifesting for the first time directly to the perpetrator. Dr. Helena then formally presented judicial documents, officially notifying him about filed regressive action, already implemented bank blockings, judicially authorized salary, possibility of civil imprisonment if he didn't adequately cooperate with recovery process of amounts I paid during 4 years plus monetary correction, legal interest, substantial moral damages. You have a simple choice, Mr. Ricardo. Fully cooperate with recovery process, attend judicial hearings, negotiate sustainable long-term payment agreement, or face maximum forced execution including possible criminal accountability for embezzlement depending on evidence that additional investigation may reveal about premeditation, ideological falsehood, documentary fraud. She professionally but implacably explained evident legal authority in every firmly pronounced word. Ricardo pathetically collapsed on the old stained sofa, head between trembling hands, defeated posture of a man finally confronted with inevitable consequences of cowardly choices. Part of me felt momentary pity, remembering the older brother who protected me from school bullies as a child, patiently taught me to ride a bicycle, consoled me when parents fought violently before traumatic divorce. But pity evaporated quickly, remembering 4 years of extreme sacrifice, sleepless nights worrying about bills, humiliation of colleagues discovering devastating financial situation, impossibility of building emergency savings or planning minimally for the future. That Era's brother had progressively died over years of self-destructive choices, replaced by a cowardly stranger who betrayed the most sacred imaginable family trust. Where's Patricia now? I asked coldly. Working at the gym until 6 p.m., he responded defeatedly. We'll wait for her together then. I want you both present when I explain exactly what you'll legally face for the next years as direct consequence of your deliberate actions. I want you to fully understand that I'm no longer a helpless victim but a determined creditor who will implacably pursue every owed cent until total recovery or until you have absolutely nothing left to take, I declared, sitting comfortably in the worn armchair, preparing for the long 6-hour wait until Patricia S. returned, determined not to leave that apartment without complete confrontation with both perpetrators simultaneously. The following hours passed in tense, uncomfortable silence broken only by Ricardo's occasional attempts to initiate justifying conversations that I immediately interrupted with silencing icy looks. Marina prepared coffee from the small, messy kitchen, calmly serving us while Sergio remained vigilantly near the door, ensuring Ricardo wouldn't try to escape or prematurely alert. Patricia and Dr. Helena reviewed legal documents, mentally preparing for the formal presentation she would make when Patricia arrived. At 6:23 p.m., we heard the key turning in the lock. Door opening. Patricia entering tired from work, cheerfully talking on the phone, abruptly interrupting herself, seeing the apartment full of unexpected visitors, expression instantly transforming from casual unconcern to calculating panic, immediately recognizing me. Deborah, what a surprise! Didn't know you knew Ricardo? You useless idiot! Did you tell her where we were? She reflexively accused, manipulative mind already frantically working, seeking defensive narrative, emotional or physical escape strategy. Nobody told anything. Patricia, I was found through professional investigation after you committed amateur mistake opening bank account using true identity, arrogantly believing elapsed time made you safe from consequences. You completely, devastatingly underestimated the determination of a woman you tried to systematically destroy but only inadvertently strengthened through adversity. I responded calmly, controlled voice deliberately contrasting with growing panic visible in her facial features. Patricia then tried predictable emotional strategy, tears instantly sprouting, perfectly calibrated trembling voice, mixing false regret, with strategic victimization. Deborah, you don't understand. We were financially desperate. She had no choice, never wanted to harm you. Always planned to eventually pay, but situations spiraled out of control. We lost jobs, had to move double quotes. She dramatized, trying to evoke sympathy, guilt, hesitation in proceeding with complete legal accountability. But years of intensive therapy, processing manipulation, had completely immunized me against her techniques, allowing me to see clearly through rehearsed performance without feeling absolutely anything except cold anger, unshakable determination. Save the cheap, manipulative theater, Patricia. It worked perfectly for years ago when I was naive, trusting, emotionally vulnerable. It doesn't work anymore on the woman you inadvertently created through years, forcing me to become stronger, more resilient, more determined than I ever imagined possible. I firmly responded. Dr. Helena then formally presented judicial documents identical to those shown Ricardo, methodically, implacably, explaining legal, financial, potentially criminal consequences both would face for the next years as direct result of deliberate, fraudulent choices. Already implemented bank blockings meant Patricia's salary would be garnished 30% monthly until complete recovery of the $127,000 I paid, plus corrections, interest, moral damages. The vehicle registered in her name would be arrested, eventually judicially auctioned, applying values to the debt. Any asset discovered in the future would be blocked, garnished, implacably executed. This is absurd, illegal. You can't destroy our lives like this. It was just a misunderstanding, not a crime. You signed documents voluntarily. Nobody forced you. Patricia protested with anger, replacing false tears when she realized emotional manipulation was completely failing. Exactly. Mrs. Patricia, Mrs. Deborah voluntarily signed based on your deliberate false representations about the document's nature, involved responsibility, payment, intention. This legally constitutes fraud, contractual, bad faith, possibly embezzlement, depending on additional evidence investigation may reveal. And even if technically it didn't configure a crime, you civilly respond fully for damages caused through perfectly legal, common, routine, regressive action in cases of defaulting guarantees. Dr. Helena explained with unquestionable professional authority, decades of legal experience evident in every precisely articulated argument. Patricia then tried to negotiate, beg more favorable conditions, extended terms, value reductions, as she instinctively always did when confronted with consequences. But Dr. Helena was inflexible. Terms would be judicially dictated based on proven real financial capacity of both, not on manipulative emotional negotiations. They would pay for years, decades, if necessary, until total recovery, or until they had absolutely nothing more legally executable. You made a deliberate choice, destroying the life of a person who unconditionally trusted, true family. Now you'll face daily choice for the next years, responsibly pay modest but continuous installments within financial capacity, or have everything you own judicially executed, salaries garnished to the maximum legally permitted, accounts perpetually blocked until complete final payment. The choice is exclusively yours, but the consequences are inevitable, implacable, unquestionable. I finally concluded, deep satisfaction flooding me, seeing defeated, frightened expressions, finally understanding the magnitude of consequences they would face in subsequent years. We left the apartment 30 minutes later, leaving Patricia and Ricardo shockedly absorbing the devastatingly transformed new reality of their irreversibly changed existences. In the car, returning silently through darkened highways illuminated only by occasional headlights, I finally felt the psychological closure I'd sought during 4 years of incessant struggle. It wasn't exactly happiness, triumphant joy I'd previously imagined, because I recognized subsequent years would probably be frustrating trying to extract payments from chronically financially irresponsible people. But it was validation, partial restorative justice, legal and moral confirmation that I wasn't guilty, didn't deserve inflicted suffering, had fought correctly, persistently against injustice, instead of passively accepting the role of permanent victim. The following months confirmed Dr. Helena's realistic predictions about financial recovery difficulties, even with judicially implemented salary garnishment. Monthly amounts received were modest, approximately $450, totaling 30% of both salaries, meaning total recovery of the $127,000 would literally take decades if they maintained stable employment, didn't flee again, didn't hide income working informally. But each monthly deposit represented symbolic victory, continuous validation that I'd fought correctly, tangible accountability even if financially insignificant compared to total amounts paid during 4 sacrificial years. I finally completed payment of the last debt installment to the bank on a sunny Tuesday morning, exactly 4 years minus 2 months after receiving the devastating initial letter transforming existence into financial nightmare. Marina insisted we modestly celebrate with dinner at a simple but significant restaurant. First meal out without paralyzing financial guilt in complete years. We toasted with cheap but tasty wine, not necessarily celebrating complete financial recovery, but survival. Resilience, strengthening through extreme adversity that could easily have permanently destroyed me, but ultimately didn't. You are literally the strongest, most determined, most inspiring person I know. Dayu crossed financial and emotional hell that would definitively break most people, emerged wiser, stronger, more capable than you were previously. I'm infinitely proud, honored to call you friend, true sister. Marina toasted emotionally, tears shining in warm brown eyes that never doubted, never abandoned during the most difficult imaginable years. 6 months after final payment, I received an unexpected call from Sergio informing a surprising development. Patricia had lost her gym job after an argument with her supervisor. Ricardo had also been fired from his job selling dental plans due to chronic inadequate performance. Both were trying to survive with sporadic, poorly paid, informal jobs. Salary garnishments had obviously ceased without formal salaries to garnish continuous financial recovery, indefinitely interrupted. Part of me felt predictable frustration that their self-destructive pattern continued, making adequate financial accountability impossible. But a larger part recognized that true victory didn't reside in complete monetary recovery, but in personal transformation forced through adversity, legally validated moral justice, capacity to rebuild own life independently of their subsequent actions or inactions. I used part of the first savings accumulated after bank payment as down payment on a finally small-owned apartment. Modest, but genuinely mine in a tranquil, safe neighborhood close to work. Parsimoniously furnishing with pieces carefully chosen, prioritizing functionality, comfort over superficial appearance. Each object deliberately positioned in the space represented conscious, methodically rebuilt existence after complete devastation. Financial and emotional independence painfully but ultimately valuably conquered, precisely for having been conquered through extreme effort instead of easily granted. Marina remained incomparable, loyal friend regularly visiting, offering continuous support even after immediate crisis had passed, repeatedly demonstrating that true family is consciously chosen based on loyalty demonstrated through actions instead of biological accidents of shared birth. Occasionally, I still received unofficial updates through Sergio about Patricia and Ricardo's situation, frequent moves to cheap addresses, numerous unstable jobs lasting months before inevitable dismissals, marital relationship progressively deteriorating under constant financial pressure, stress of perpetual legal accountability hovering over existences. I didn't feel sadistic satisfaction imagining their sufferings because I recognized true revenge didn't reside in causing proportional pain, but in living well, authentically prospering, transforming destructive trauma into shareable wisdom, helping others. I began regularly volunteering at a nonprofit organization offering free financial guidance to people indebted through poorly understood guarantees, predatory loans, credit card traps. Each person helped represent a partial redemption of experienced suffering, transforming individual pain into beneficial collective purpose, helping prevent similar tragedies. 2 years after final payment, I received an unexpected message through Ricardo's new social media profile asking for tardy apologies, long explanations about mitigating circumstances, request for family reconciliation. I read the message once without responding, permanently deleting it. Forgiveness might eventually come through continuous therapy, additional time healing deep wounds, but family reconciliation would never be possible or desirable. Blood bonds had been irreparably broken through calculated betrayal. Systematically destroyed trust would never be rebuilt, even with convenient tardy apologies, arising years after consequences had been forcibly imposed instead of voluntarily assumed with immediate, genuine remorse. Ricardo would remain technically my brother, biologically, but would be eternally a stranger emotionally, morally, relationally. Today, at 48 years old, 6 complete years after receiving the devastating initial letter transforming existence into prolonged nightmare, I live comfortably, modestly in a completely paid-off own apartment, work satisfactorily at the same company with recent promotion reflecting continuous professional dedication despite preceding years, personal turbulence, maintain healthy emergency savings preventing future financial vulnerability, regularly volunteer helping others traversing similar financial crises. Patricia and Ricardo continue existing peripherally through occasional garnishments when they temporarily get formal jobs. Modest, irregular deposits sporadically arrive in, reminding that legal accountability remains perpetually active, even if complete financial recovery is statistically unlikely during our lifetimes. I've recovered until now approximately $42,000 of the $127,000 originally paid. 33% recovery rate after 6 years of continuous legal effort, costing additional attorney, investigative fees, mathematically frustrating but psychologically satisfying, validating. I fought correctly persistently instead of resignedly accepting injustice. The most valuable lesson painfully learned through prolonged ordeal wasn't about finances, contracts, legal protection against family scammers, although I certainly learned much pragmatically about those topics too. It was about fundamental human resilience, capacity to rebuild completely destroyed existence brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. It was about redefining family based on loyalty demonstrated through sacrificial actions instead of automatic presumptions based on accidentally shared blood kinship. It was about transforming temporary victimization into permanent agency, destructive trauma into constructive wisdom, individual pain into collective purpose, helping others avoid similar traps. Patricia and Ricardo made a deliberate choice, trying to financially and emotionally destroy me for temporary selfish benefit. They ultimately failed because they completely underestimated human capacity for adaptation, survival, growth through extreme adversity. Each installment painfully paid during 4 years progressively strengthened me instead of permanently breaking me as they probably planned. Each necessary sacrifice built discipline, resilience, determination I would never have developed without extreme pressure forcing uncomfortable growth. I don't thank them for the betrayal, nor completely forgive their actions, but I serenely recognize that overcome adversity substantially strengthened character, clarified authentic values, taught profound lessons about human nature. Trust carefully discerned instead of naively granted, intrinsic value independent of external validation or temporary material circumstances. That fateful afternoon when Patricia appeared manipulatively smiling with poisoned cake of family guilt simultaneously marks devastating end of previous naivety and challenging beginning of consciously, deliberately, authentically rebuilt existence. She and Ricardo may have stolen money, temporarily destroyed financial stability, caused prolonged suffering, but completely failed at the implicit objective of permanently, irreversibly destroying me. I was reborn stronger from the ashes of their devastation like a resilient, triumphant phoenix, and this existential victory infinitely transcends any ultimately recovered or unrecovered monetary value. Marina remains to this day closest, most loyal friend, true sister in all fundamentally significant senses. Dr. Helena became occasional professional mentor, offering voluntary legal guidance when complicated cases arise through my volunteer work. Sergio maintains sporadic contact, updating me about occasional locations of Patricia and Ricardo when they temporarily get formal jobs, allowing renewed salary. Dr. Carlos from the bank sent a personal note congratulating me on complete payment. Mentioning my case internally served as example of successful collaborative negotiation, mutually benefiting bank and client instead of destructive, costly litigation. Each relationship built or strengthened through adversity represents true wealth. Genuine patrimony that can never be falsified, stolen, destroyed by opportunistic scammers temporarily exploiting others' kindness. If you're traversing similar situation of family betrayal, fraudulent guarantee, financial devastation caused by people who should protect you instead of exploiting you, know deeply that recovery is absolutely possible. It won't be easy, quick, or necessarily complete, but it's viable with persistent determination, solidary community support, adequate professional resources, refusal to passively accept the role of permanent helpless victim. Fight strategically, intelligently, implacably for deserved justice, not only for selfish own benefit, but for potential future victims. Perpetrators will inevitably target again if allowed to operate unpunished. Seek professional therapy, adequately processing trauma without internalizing guilt that belongs exclusively to perpetrators. Redefine family based on demonstrated loyalty instead of automatic blood presumptions. Transform individual pain into collective purpose, helping others avoid similar traps. And mainly, never ever allow others' malicious actions to permanently define your intrinsic value. Capacity to rebuild meaningful existence. potential to authentically prosper after extreme adversity. Today, Patricia works sporadically when she gets temporary jobs. Salary percentage being automatically garnished deposited monthly in my bank account. It's not exactly the ideal glorious scenario of she works to pay me as the title dramatically suggests, but it's tangible legal accountability, partial restorative justice, continuous validation that the fight was ultimately worth it, despite persistent financial frustrations. And this, combined with complete rebuilding of own life independently of their actions, represents true victory, infinitely transcending, probably impossible, complete monetary recovery. If you enjoyed this story of overcoming, resilience, and rebuilding after a devastating family betrayal, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments below. Your overcoming story also deserves to be told. To hear the next story, click on the screen. Thank you for watching, and always remember, you are infinitely stronger, more resilient, more capable than any betrayal can temporarily make it seem. Adversity strengthens when courageously faced instead of breaking when passively resignedly accepted.